Welcome back to the channel. We are reviewing the 2021 Booker Prize Longlist. Long list of books. It's not that long of a list, I guess. 13 books. And today we are reviewing Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, who also happens to be a Nobel Prize winner for literature. With my icon, Bob Dylan. He not busy being born is busy dying. Today we're reviewing Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. It's a literary fiction novel, his newest. You might know him from his book, Never Let Me Go, which they subsequently made a movie out of with Keira Knightley by the same title. I've not read that book. This is my first Ishiguro experience. And I think it was interesting. I'll give a synopsis if you haven't heard one, or a summary of the story. The story is written in first person by what Ishiguro classifies as an AF, which presumably means artificial friend, but I don't think that's found anywhere in the book. It's just AF, which for some people might be confusing AF. Let the listener understand my meaning. Klara is an AF, and she is the one narrating the story in first person, which in itself is an interesting device for Ishiguro to employ. Certainly creative. The story of an AF, the story of an artificial intelligence, technological being. And the story is written in the not so distant future, because it is very relatable still. It's somewhat of a presumed environment, or presumed world that is not so far-fetched that we have to suspend too much reality to relate or follow the story that Ishiguro is painting for us. What happened to my light? What a weird... Huh. You guys need a little more light in here? The sun is failing us. How do I do this? From the floor. Ugh. There we go. So, Ishiguro gives us this narrator. First person narrator is Klara, and she is purchased by a girl named Josie. And we watch the story of Klara and Josie, and we get creative insight into the technological dynamics or the programming dynamics of Klara, the AF, the artificial friend, created to keep children from loneliness at this time in the future. We get insight, as I said, we get insight into the programming and the machine learning and all of the artificial intelligence kind of building on itself. And as Klara gains insight to the world around her and the people around her and the behavior of humans, she is able to integrate that insight into her programming so that she becomes smarter, much like a Furby, but exponentially more Furbish, if I may. If you ever had a Furby, please go ahead and smash that like button for such a great reference. I'll drop 90s references all day long. Did you ever have a Digimon or a Gigapet? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you ever had an AF, then this video has lasted way too long in the digital ecosystems of the portal. Foreshadowing. That's classic foreshadowing right there. Anyways, moving on. Klara is an intelligent AF. She is a special AF. There seems to be a unique capability that this AF has to draw insight and make conclusions and connect dots. So, important to the story, one day she observes a man from the window of the shop that she is at, waiting to be purchased and on display. She observes a man named Beggar Man and his dog. That's what she calls them. He was laid out on the cement across the street in the city where she's being sold. And she concludes he's dead. Many people passing by kind of take a look. He's kind of far off across the street, so she can't be sure, but she concludes he is dead. And it isn't long before the sun comes up and shines light on Beggar Man, and he gets up, and so does the dog. And Klara's programming and her machine learning, she concludes, internal to herself, that it was the sun's special favor that enabled Beggar Man to be revived with his dog. And so she logs that in her mind, and we watch throughout the story, Ishiguro does this masterfully, where he gives us Klara's personification of the sun. She's over and over again observing the beauty of light and concluding it's representative of the kindness of the sun. And so that becomes a key insight for her. She ends up being purchased and goes to live with this girl, Josie, who is sick. And we find out later in the story she's sick because she underwent what society is called being lifted, where there's genetic modification. And it's somewhat risky to do, but it's a genetic modification, maybe of the brain cells or the IQ levels or something, maybe even physical for athletic capabilities or something. But children at this time had the opportunity to be lifted or to be left intact. It was probably expensive to do. I can't remember what the book indicates. But Josie was sick from being lifted. And so she's dying. The genetic modification procedure, I guess, didn't yield the results that it intended. And so we watch as Klara is living with Josie, becoming friends with her, observing her life. And there's a time when Josie takes a turn for the worse and she's dying. And Klara concludes, I have to make a deal with the sun. I have to go and petition the sun to bestow the same favor he bestowed on Beggar Man and Dog for Josie, because she cannot die. And so she keeps all this to herself. That's a key point through the story. No one is able to correct her and say, no, you stupid AF. The sun does not do that. That's not what Josie needs, is more sunshine or the special favor of the sun. You concluded incorrectly. She keeps it to herself. She goes on this special mission. She pleads with the sun and makes a deal with the sun that she will stop pollution if the sun will heal Josie and bestow his favor on her. So she goes on this journey, and she ends up attempting to do this for Josie, even at the expense of herself in certain ways that I won't go into, because who possibly can explain? But she finally breaks this machine that she thinks is causing all the pollution, and Josie doesn't get better, and she soon realizes why. That wasn't the only machine making pollution. So she goes back to the sun to plead for favoritism, to say, you are kind and you know my intention and you know Josie and Rick are truly in love. Please won't you bestow favor on her and heal her? And it isn't long after that. Spoiler alert. Spoiler. Spoiler. It isn't long after that there's this crazy moment where Josie is really declining in her sickness and really on the verge of death. And there's this wild day where the sky is all dark and suddenly the sun starts to shine through the clouds, and everyone rushes into Josie's room, and Klara says, no, we have to keep the curtains open, blah, blah, blah. And the sun shines in the room and fills the room. And soon after that day, Josie starts to get better. And apparently the sun responded to Klara's petitioning and bestowed favor and healed Josie. Because she lives. Spoiler! Spoiler! She lives. And, she lives and she survives. And what do you know? What next? Yeah. So thematically, what the hell is going on? What the fuck, Ishiguro? What the fuck are you doing? What is going on here? Did the sun really heal Josie, or what happened? Here's my evaluation of what happened, if you care to know. The themes that he's exploring. So here's what I expected. I expected through 3/4 of the book, right up until Josie's actually healed, I expected this train of thought that Klara is pursuing, that the sun will heal her if she just does this or that she had concluded off of her calculations around Beggar Man and Dog. I was expecting Ishiguro to be exploring how artificial intelligence can make mistakes or something. How artificial intelligence is just... I was expecting him to explore, what does it mean for us to be human? If a machine can learn to feel, and the machine can learn empathy, and the machine can even make sacrifices, and can presumably love, is there anything unique and special about being human? And I think he was exploring that to a degree. I think he then kind of switches gears, and it's almost like this is a left turn. This is a 90 degree or a 180. It almost feels like an exploration of the foolishness of religion. And when it started to surface in that way, I started to feel that Ishiguro had these disjointed thematic elements that in one way were very stimulating, but in a way, on the level of like literary enjoyment, it becomes almost like he couldn't tie the knots on everything. There's a lot of frayed ends, in my opinion, because thematically it seems disjointed. It seems that these things overlap in a way that doesn't work very well, because you're left wondering, what are we talking about? What is this story about? So why do I say it's this exploration of the foolishness of religion? Because we see Klara coming to the sun the same way humans come to gods and petition them for help and salvation and favoritism, really, favoritism. And we see deals being made, and we just see this like perspective of the kindness of this despondent being, the sun, this being that's not interactive and doesn't really engage, but brings nourishment to Klara because she's solar powered, and she observed that thing with Beggar Man, and she continues to build on that thought process as she observes the sun and its beauty and light and how it bends and falls and things like that and illuminates. We see these multiple scenes where she goes and prays to the sun, essentially asking for help for Josie. And it just feels very religious. And then we see something that seems like it worked. Like her prayers to the sun worked, and Josie is spared from her sickness because of the prayers of Klara, this robot. Wow. So interesting. So many dynamics here. So many things. But there's not a moment in the story where we are invited to believe anything magical, like the sun shining down and bestowing favoritism on Josie. We're not inclined to believe that. It's not like throughout the story all the characters know that the sun is this being that is benevolent and whatever. They just view it as the sun. Claire is the only one who has this perspective. And it's because of her misinformed or misguided or ignorant calculations and evaluations of certain events that she observed. And her programming led her down this path to believe these things. And so we know that the sun is not what healed Josie. These things happen, could be coincidental on some level. I think that Ishiguro is exploring a little bit, maybe not even intentionally, just this concept around religion and around ignorance and all of that. But at the same time, he seems to be exploring artificial intelligence and the impact of, and what it means to be human if a machine can be taught to essentially be human in the body of a robot. But of course, what does it really mean? Is there a soul? Maybe those themes aren't so incongruent as I'm initially concluding, because maybe the exploration is what does it mean to be human? Is there such a thing as a soul? Because religion would tell us there is. And, that we don't have any real proof for any of that. We don't have any proof that the things that we identify as soulish or heart aren't just synapses in our brains going off for different reasons. So, anyways, did I like this book? I can't say I liked this book. It was tedious to read. Ishiguro was a slow builder, which is fine, but it wasn't like he was slow building with this prose that made it worth it. It was kind of just like, this is so tedious. I'm anticipating something significant to happen. There were moments I enjoyed, but for the most part, I just felt like, eh. And that's kind of my evaluation of Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I wanted to like it. Conceptually, I thought, and thematically, I thought, this is interesting and stimulating, and I'd love to sit down over some whiskeys with another individual that's read it and explore these concepts. So in that way, the book brings value to my life. Except I don't have anyone to talk to about it. Except for you guys. But in terms of a good read, I don't think I will press through that one again. And I honestly don't really know what was going on. Like, what were you getting at, Ishiguro? And there were moments that I really had to not just suspend belief. It wasn't about suspending belief. I had to kind of like let him have one. Like, okay, it's not really a believable part of the plot line. I don't think that would happen. There's a moment, since I've given enough spoilers, there's a moment where the dad is helping Klara destroy this machine, and it's like, it took like a 5-minute conversation for her to convince him to do that, which seems preposterous. So anyways, if you liked the book, let me know. If you think my conclusions are off, let me know. I felt like it was not worth the time. That's how I felt. Kazuo Ishiguro, Klara and the Sun. Stay tuned for my next review on No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. And I'm now currently reading China Room. I haven't attempted to learn the name of that author yet. Sunjeev Sahota. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's right here. Thank you for watching. Good luck. And let me know your thoughts on Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Happy Friday the 13th.